Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Adu, coming to you from a steamy Accra. I'm back after escaping the raining season and just in time for climate change to rear its head. I tell you folks, November is typically not this hot, but with all the trees leaving us for various purposes that are not to the benefit of all people, which is part of the reason that inspired me to put together this compilation that we're going to listen to this week. All that to say that it's hot and it's unseasonably hot. And a lot of that has to do with the ways that we are interacting with the land. So for the last few months, I have been in the U.S. via London. I visited a farms, forest and land farm in Hawaii. I visited the farm, which is also known as Stanford, in California. Did some hiking in Colorado, gathered my thoughts. And as part of that thought gathering, and as 5 years of storytelling about dynamic diasporans becomes 6, this week's compilation is a reflection on visionary entrepreneurs doing essential work improving food systems as stewards of Earth's abundant resources and by building and delivering value to communities. Each of these guests, Lawoyin, founder and CEO of Pricepally in Nigeria, Nana Opoku Ageyman-Prempeh, CEO of Grow For Me in Ghana, Wellington Baiden, CEO of Portal Forest Estates, also in Ghana, and Asmeret Berhe-Lumax, founder of the One Love Community Fridge Project in the US. Each of them engages daily with the realities of the global challenges we are all facing, which are the availability and access to affordable, quality food, improving the livelihoods of those that deliver that food, and planning the land for the long haul. As we listen to excerpts from these conversations over the years, I want you to keep in mind that we all have a role to play. So whether you're planting or eating or consuming, that thoughtfulness is something that we're all going to need to think about sooner rather than later. First up, Luth Lawoyin of Pricepally. Let us begin with the business of land matters.
Why do we have to pay 30% more than we did last month, which was just a few weeks back? So that got me curious. Started looking into it. I did quite some research, found out that it was largely an African problem, like a third world problem, if you can put it that way. So you have, Nigeria, for instance, we have the highest income to food ratio in the world. So Nigerians spend more on food than any other country in the world, which was just amazing to find out. Typically, a middle-income family here spends about 60, probably now up to 70%, because there's been a lot of pricing,
inflation
and all of that. So it was just very amazing to me that we're spending more on food than any other thing. So think of a family who you have kids, there's education there, there's security, there's housing, there's clothing, and all of those things, no matter what you earn, you have to spend 60% of what you have, what you earn on food alone. So that was interesting to me to see, okay, what exactly was the problem here and how do we solve it for ourselves? So I did more research, on-ground research. We went to these major markets, looked at the food system served in Lagos. There were some obvious reasons why the problem persisted, and there were other reasons that just came through to us after we spent some time looking into that. So majorly, the food system serving Lagos and many other African cities it's very cumbersome and it's very inefficient. There are many middlemen from the farmer to the consumer. There are several layers of, middlemen that many times don't add value to what the consumer gets at the end of the day, and the consumer has to pay more. And the farmer, on the other hand, as well, don't earn as much as they should when it comes to, the work that he puts in. So solving it for ourselves was the first thing we looked at was how do we cut out, all the extra that we have to pay for, given the fact that we were staying on the island then. So in Lagos, for example, the farther you are from the main markets that serve like the wholesale markets where these food items come from, the more you pay. So for someone who's staying in Lekki compared to someone who's staying where I stay now, you're probably going to pay 15% more than what I pay where I'm at. Looking at the retail, if you're comparing retail markets to each other. So we did first go to the major market. My wife, my friends, and I went to the major market and looked out for the prices of their, bulk items. And we saw, compared to where we were getting, where we were, we saw the difference. So we started buying for ourselves and splitting it, because those markets, you have the major wholesalers there. So it's hard to get retail and all of that. So we started buying, for ourselves and splitting it. And a couple of months after that, we saw the difference. Like you could literally tell that we're saving money and we're getting more value for money.
Mm.
Yeah. So the next thing was, how do we get more people to know about this or to, take advantage of this? So we had a WhatsApp group, putting things together. Then I reached out to a friend who we had done something way back about the idea of enabling people to be able to buy bulk from these wholesalers and for them to be able to split. Like if you don't need the whole, basket of tomatoes, you could get a quarter, you could get a tenth of it. So we built the first version of the website and the app, and we launched it November 2019, tested it for a couple of months. Then 2020, it came into full effect, and COVID came around the time too. So COVID also accelerated, the use of the app and all of that. People saw the value, and we've been, pushing it up since then. So that's how we started. But, there are very many other parts to it of how we got here and what we are trying to do and all of that. So, what we're trying to do at the end of the day is just create a smarter food system, because what you have now is, there's so many silly things going on there that a simple process would improve. So that's what we are trying to do across the cities in Africa, starting with Lagos, moving to other cities in Nigeria before we think of, moving out to other countries. So we look at the food system in a city, see where the blocks are, and, plug in our solution and, take it on from there. So that's it basically. Yeah.
So a few things that you said. One is middlemen, right?
Yeah.
We have a culture of middlemen all across the board.
Yeah.
And so in terms of how for this to take hold, you're displacing a lot of jobs as those middlemen. Have you, or you will be eventually, has that been a minor pushback, or is that something that you're just whatever, you're not really, or is there an opportunity to redeploy them in a different, more value add role?
Exactly. So that's what we are looking at. It's not exactly to displace them. It's to look out for the people who are actually adding value and being able to make them work smarter. So for instance, you have a farmer in the rural area who has produce, but does not have adequate information on who to sell to, what the prices are, how they, make their own value out of it. And you have a middleman who has the demand, who is in the market to sell, but doesn't know where these guys, where to get, the farmer produce from. So the first line of problem there is information. So when you solve that problem of information, how does, two of them, how do they get value for what they do? The farmer has to be able to get something reasonable, while the middleman who takes it from the farmer to sell to the consumers also has to make their value. Get their own value out of it. So for someone like that, the problem is just information and arranging that. Bringing that arrangement in so that can go smoothly. But you also have a situation where a middleman is the culture here. So part of what we are trying to change is the culture when it comes to off-takers. Basically, you have some of them who have the money. They look out for farmers who have produce, beat them to the last of get the lowest possible price ever, because the farmer doesn't have, much choice, and rip the farmer off. Then they bring it, take it to the next level of middlemen. So some of them just pick from a farmer and move it to the next person who is going to take it to the next person and who's going to take it to another person before it gets to the consumer. So in that chain where you have somebody who is just taking advantage of a farmer and, moving the item to the next stage and making a huge profit off it, it's not exactly serving the system well. So if you if you can find the real middleman who would buy and resell almost immediately and not have to go like 3-4 chains just to make a quick buck, that's more value to, to the consumer at the end of the day, because he's not going to charge, he's not, making things more expensive. He's directly getting it from the farmer to be able to sell. Yeah. So simplifying that and taking out people who take advantage of the system is like what Pricepally would eventually do. Because at the end of the day, we want first, the problem we identify that's a major problem is the first line of information, like people knowing, the farmer knowing where to sell to, the person who needs to buy from the farmer knowing where to buy from and when to buy. That's like a first line of information that's not there at all and causes a lot of problems, causes waste on the farmer side and causes,
Right.
Yeah. So things like that, as simple as that, is what we want to solve first before you go into problems around storage and stuff like that. So for instance, a middleman who buys dry goods and stores them to resell is adding some value, because at the time he's storing, he's incurring expenses and But for some who would stock them and just wait for when there's a shortage in the market, or even cause a shortage because they buy a lot to stock. Yeah, people like that are not serving the system well. People like that need to be taken out or need to change the way they operate. So if consumers have a better option and they see that consumers are moving to the better option, they will also be forced to work very well. I mean, to do the right thing. And we are open to work with as many people as possible, as long as the value you bring into this very fragile system is not taking advantage of the system. So basically, I'll stop there.
In terms of building the verticals that build the business, because I'm hearing that while it's it's an app, right? You're in the front, it's an app. You mentioned a few different things. So one is the farmers. So identifying the farmers, like that was probably no small feat in terms of determining who you wanted to work with, like, and how they grow, right? Some farmers have good practices. Do you have a standard for the ones that you work with? So tell us more about the relationship with the farmers and how you kind of start to project what it is that you want from them so that you can bring like certain baskets to the customer.
Yeah. So there are different ways to work with the farmers currently. The first one, which really works for us, is through partnerships. So we have organizations that already take care of, all the problems associated with the farmers, inputs and the way they should plant and stuff like that. We're working with 3 of them now. So they already take care of that. And we are just like off-takers who guarantee that we'll take their produce and we are selling to the right people at the right price, stuff like that. So there's a first layer of that really works for us. But there are some that we've met with in person, through, we actually had, a form that farmers can fill on the platform and stuff. And we also have agents that give us reports on farmers they know and the produce that are available. So for those, we actually have agents who take care of them. And there's a first line. So for instance, when we started, we were just looking out for farmers with the produce and be able to like do business with them. But it was very, very unsustainable because of so many reasons. Some, apart from where farmers are located and how they operate, what they plant and stuff, there are all sorts of issues that didn't make that really work for us. So we had to like come up with like a standard of, that we need to work with them. The first was the size of land they are working on, because what we call smallholder farmers, in Africa are not exactly for all smallholder farmers, but they plant less than what, the international standard is. So first we want to look at, how much are they actually going to produce? How much can we buy from them over time before we exhaust them? If it's something, a handful and we can work with, we do work with them. Then we look at the produce, what they're planting. And another factor will be the level of education, because at some point, when we're working with some farmers, some of them don't necessarily regard agreements or contracts and stuff like that. So for the layer of farmers that we work with for now, you have to have some level of education and all of that. Over time, we'll be able to like trickle down to these other people. But for now, for the standard that we have, you have to have some level of education and be able to, respect agreements. So we have them like that. And we usually encourage them to work together in cohorts so that we have quite a substantial amount of produce to be able to to take from them. So it's a mix of quite a number of things. We also look out for farmers who, some do have greenhouses or are technology inclined to be able to like make more produce for themselves from simple things like irrigation and stuff like that. So those things count. And when we see those, we embrace them and we work with them. Our model actually pays them more because we're able to like pay them better than typical off-takers will. And our processes are open and transparent. They know what the market price is. We let them know what we are buying and how much we're selling. And most of the time, it's a good deal for them. So in regards to how we get them, those are the two ways we do. But we prefer the first, which is working with government agencies or agencies that already take care of quite a number of things. And we just act as off-takers for them. And that works best for us. But we know that as we scale, we need to like improve and increase our reach to these farmers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm immediately thinking about Amazon, right? You know, that's the world or because of my US context and I guess otherwise, but I'm thinking of them and how they purchased Whole Foods Market. And the idea, and I'm sure beyond that, if we were to do some more digging, they probably own, they're now a product producer, like Amazon has food products, right? So they're white labeling in some cases, but I would venture to say that they probably are now investing in the agriculture sector pretty heavily.
Yeah.
And so when you think about, would you talk about scaling and how you determine rolling out into bigger cities, is that something that you see potentially? Because this could be huge. I mean, Africa, the sky's the limit. There are so many people. And as you say, you want 1 billion digital users.
Yeah.
How are you next seeing getting to that billion within this business model?
Yeah. So first we are looking at, we solve it per city. We look at the city, we look at the food system, we look at those feeding that system, which is the farmers. Usually they are outskirts of that city or even far away from that city. For instance, Lagos, 80%, 70% of what comes into Lagos comes in from the north of Nigeria, especially when it comes to the seasonality and all of that. So we are looking at a city like Lagos, looking at Port Harcourt, looking at Abuja. We want to like solve for each city and see how we can connect each city when it comes to supply and those who supply them. So it's a two-way thing. You have to solve for the demand and also solve for the supply as well. In terms of how we want to scale this, it's a city model, and we're going to like get it across as many cities as possible in Africa, especially the ones who have the similar problem of just very cumbersome supply chains. Once we are able to, for instance, in Lagos now, we have the best prices when it comes to tomatoes, peppers, onions, and stuff people used to make their soup. And that's because we've simplified that supply chain. Yeah, we've been able to, the first advantage is, we get a lot of demand for those, and that demand, we move it to the initial phase was working with wholesalers. So a wholesaler who brings in a truck of tomatoes has like 50 baskets to sell and is selling for, say, 10,000 a basket. We come to him and tell him, look, we want all your baskets and we could take all this off you at once. So, but you need to give us some discount so that at that discount, we pass on that discount to the consumers. But it even gets better when we're getting it from the farmer. And it's, so it's deeper discount. So when you have advantages, especially on price, it's a big factor for consumers because price is it's a very price sensitive market. For as low as, a 50 naira, difference in prices will make consumers come to you because things are just really tough, so we've been able to figure that out using those products I mentioned because we found out that's what, a lot of people buy more. And so we see that once we're able to like solve for price and solve for convenience, then we can rapidly grow. And that's what we're experiencing now, rapidly grow that. So at the end of the day, what really matters is supply, because you can actually tweak demand in any way, form or possible. You can, there are many ways to let people come to you to buy. But what you have to make sure is that supply is consistent. Supply is, always there at the right price and at the best quality. So that's where, like you said, Amazon is, investing in a lot of that. I also know that Bill Gates too is buying a lot of land and, invest in agriculture. I know, these guys see what the future is. So yeah, we also see that. And we need to solve for ourselves because, Amazon wouldn't solve for Africa. All these guys won't solve for Africa.
Well, we're looking to you to be that Amazon.
Yeah, I'm hoping to be. Yeah. So, so we need to solve for ourselves. It's not like the systems don't work. It's just that we do many silly things that don't make sense. Tomatoes from up until now, and it's always been, people have identified this problem for a long time. So most of the tomatoes that are coming from the north to Lagos are usually, packed in baskets, in woven baskets. And it's guaranteed that you lose, for that journey of almost a day, you lose about 30% of that. And it's been that since, it's still that now, so it makes no sense. So, we use crates, to move items, except when the customers request for, woven baskets, because some actually do, because they are very used to it. So, we save more money than the typical wholesaler in the market will do, because we just use, crates instead of baskets. So there are, things like that can easily, and there are many ways where infrastructure is also like the bane of the problem. Storage, for instance, is just ridiculous. If we had good storage systems, we would save a lot of food. Food wouldn't be expensive. For instance, you see a situation where when food is in season, the prices drop ridiculously. Like there are some times that when some food items are in season, the farmer literally gives you, like, you bought everything, but he still has enough supply and he just gives it out because there's nothing to do with it. Otherwise, it's going to get spoiled and all of that. So in that instance, that farmer could actually make more money if there's a way for him to store that food over a period of time. But electricity, all sorts of things are just like really critical. But we have to solve it where we are, and we have to like do the best we can and grow from there. So that's what we believe, and hopefully serve the billions of people who would appreciate this.
In Grow For Me, we focus on a very complicated problem. A very complicated problem in the sense that input financing and crop production has its own set of challenges. While sourcing and gathering these harvests and ensuring they're delivered to the right places has its own set of complex problems. So once again, we have to break these things into very basic units and deal with them. In terms of crop production, we realized that farmers needed not just input financing like money to buy fertilizer and seed, they also needed mechanization service where they could have their farms plowed. And they also needed, most importantly, through the whole production phase, they needed support and guidance from experts so that they could be told when to apply fertilizer, when to apply spraying, because if it's going to rain the next day and you spray, it's just going to lose everything you sprayed on. Now, take components to solve for input financing. You want to democratize the way you source for funds because banks will not give you money, so you call crowdfunding solution. You want to be able to allow farmers to know what's happening to their farm, so you employ satellite technology to give them advice on a high level, because you can now sit on your computer and see so many smallholder farmers and how they are performing, and 14-day window to prescribe to them what they should do. Also at harvest, you then come in with threshers and your trading department to buy the harvest of what they own and take what you have so that you don't lose the capital you deployed on the farm. So that's crop production, and that's a complexity that comes in how we build specific solutions right now. Just to come to trade alone, in Africa, there's a general 30% post-harvest loss.
Yes.
Think about that. In Nigeria, it's said to be 60%, meaning 60% of what is produced is lost on the farm, whilst generally in Africa, 30% of what's produced is lost post-harvest losses. So why would you spend more time doing input financing when you could actually take care of the farm, the losses that are happening on the farm, to ensure that you have an efficient agriculture industry that literally sells all that it produces, so nothing goes to waste. It's better to solve for that, to keep pushing more money to produce more. So for commodity trading, we had to break the problem down. Smallholder farmers are scattered. They are different places. They do not have data or what you call access to a smartphone app that can allow them access to the market. So we look at the technology that works in areas where there's no cellular data network, just GSM. So you take USSD, you plug into USSD, a very basic sequence that allows farmers to say, I have 2 bags and it's going for 100 CDs, and he can request to sell. And then you take advantage of existing infrastructure, once again, breaking the problems into bits infrastructure being storage. So you take existing infrastructure like warehouses and allow the warehouse officer to receive the goods and make a commission for ensuring quality and quantity. And then it doesn't end there. You have the whole transportation problem. They're not going to invest money buying trucks. So you can invest in the network of truck owners so that you can take your commodity to the right destination. So bottom line, my engineering experience allowed me to understand how to look at complex problems and find solutions that exist to mitigate and solve these problems. By so doing, prevent the loss of food on farms and also allow commodities from farms to reach the right place. And for the farmer, ensure that he has a ready market for his harvest and he's not losing money. He's not losing his crop because he doesn't have a ready market. That's the kind of experience and technicality that goes into our work. And thanks to the training my team and I have been able to build that solution. It's a long answer, but I hope it gives you context.
Yeah. And you've also given a little bit more background on the business, which I want to come back to and ask. But before I ask that question, I want to ask why the where. So why and how did you come to be living and working where you currently live? I mean, you've gone abroad, you've been other places. Why did you choose to come home?
I grew up in Ghana, but my father was a steward, so we traveled a lot. Like at the age of, I think, 16, I'd been to the US, I'd been to Germany by the age of 12, and traveled quite a lot. But and by the way, my siblings all live out of Ghana and work in different banks, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, and it goes on. But when I looked at Africa and I looked at opportunity here, and I looked in the States and in Switzerland and in different places that had been able to solve some of these basic challenges that we're faced with, I just got to the point where I said it does not make sense to take all this intellect, all this skill, all this knowledge, and go live outside in a different country and put all that skill to work there. There are enough people who have good brains to do that. I think we need more of that here. We need young, passionate people who are at least a little bit smart to solve real problems. So that's why I decided to focus and stay in Accra and be part of those who are changing the narrative in Africa. By the way, you can hear my daughter in the background because it's around me.
It's okay. She's a cheerleader.
Yeah, so that's why I decided to stay in Ghana. But why Accra? Accra is the center of every commercial activity in Ghana. You have the strongest internet, you have the investors, you have the harbors, you have the airport. So working from Accra as the headquarters and then having access into the most remote of places is the most efficient thing to do. But that said, still able to travel 14 hours to the northern part of Ghana and, test our technology and make sure it's working. So why Accra? Because it offers a platform and a place to efficiently work and grow your business.
So let me go back to the business and how you came up with this concept of crowdfunding, right? Because most agricultures you mentioned are either investing in one side or the other. And it's usually either large scale or individuals. And so the question is, how do you structure a crowdfunding and what exactly is being invested in? If I'm buying something, what am I investing in?
So basically our platform is what you see online is designed to allow you to basically, invest into two types of things, crop production or commodity trading. Remember, I said two complex problems. And the base you needed, first of all, capital as the fuel to cause the change you need. So capital for input financing for farmers translates into seed, fertilizer, and mechanization, in other sense, plowing, right? Why is that necessary? Because when you take a smallholder farmer who do about 4 to 5 acres, the output from their harvest just takes them through maybe 6 to 8 months of the year. And after that, getting towards the farming season, they have very, very limited capital to grow more. Now, so you want to be able to do some level of input financing, particularly for seed and fertilizer, so that it can produce. However, remember the issue I told you about post-harvest losses? Even though he will have a harvest, he's going to lose a considerable amount of it on the farm. Something he sweats and really works hard for, he's still going to lose some in the farm. So that when you finance trade on our website, what you're doing that the money is translating into a ready market to buy the harvest so that the farmer is not going to wait. And in the process of waiting for a buyer, the crops go bad, right? So on our platform, crowdfunding is one of the 5 ways we source financing. The different channels we source financing include fund managers, family offices, development partners or DFIs, development financial institutions, banks, and high net worth individuals. So these are all our sources of financing, but crowdfunding is just one of the many sources.
Got it.
So we can either source financing purely for input financing or for trading, but we typically now do much more of our fundraising for commodity trading. In other sense, money to buy the farmer's harvest and make sure it gets to areas that need them. So these are the two things you can finance on our platform. But when you do create an account, you go through an elaborate KYC process that is required by the Security and Exchange Commission that requires you to put some very private information,
Right.
passport, etc. Now, when you're done with that process, we then have everything linked to our accounting software, which ensures that we can really account for everything to the regulator and to our board and everyone who is part of the business. And from there, capital moves to the department. If the department is trading, it goes to commodity purchase. If the department is going to its farming, which has already been predefined and configured in our platform, goes into input financing, being seed or fertilizer or mechanization. So that's how our company is structured. And all this has been codified into our website. So whatever amount goes where it's predefined in software, and all the accountants needs to do is just follow the instructions from our software. Then it goes to the guys on the ground. On the ground, it's not software, it's human beings getting their hands dirty. So we have a slogan that says, "Grow for me now, every one can farm," or "Let's get our hands dirty whilst you watch," right? The capital then translates into either commodity purchase, which is literally buying, carrying, transporting, and this real field work, or crop production. So a lot of smallholder farmers, they have a lot of manual processes, and that's unfortunate. And what we're trying to do is modernize them. So one of the key things we do is, instead of farmers using a hoe and a cutlass, we'll use a plow from a tractor. The plow for all the farmers that are receiving input financing from us. And then instead of just the farmer getting any type of seed, we will get the best seed for the farmer to grow. Then throughout the whole growth period of the plant, we are monitoring through satellite images and advising agricultural extension officers what to look out for on this farm, because we can see on a larger scale what's happening on the farm and what they may not see with their eyes, because we have spectral images from the satellite.
Right. I was going to say, science.
And we know what it means, like in terms of whether the crops are stressed, whether there's enough water in the soil, whether there's enough crop cover, or if there's too much any crop cover, that means it's weeds growing. So we advise them on what to do. So that's how we employ technology at different stages and phases of the production side, or in terms of the trading side. For example, when commodities are moving from the warehouse to the off-taker, what we do is that the trucks have GPS trackers on them, so that the truck driver does not disappear with maybe $20,000 worth of goods, and we can ensure that we know exactly where it is. So this is basically how we are using technology within our business, and how we are ensuring that the business at every phase operates properly.
Our model sought to come up with a situation where we could have, on one hand, fast-growing tree plantations to fill the short-term need for timber, because people are always going to need forest, okay? Not only in respect of the medicines, fabrics, dyes, etc., some of which we've talked about, but even in terms of timber, right? The world's population is increasing, so definitely you're going to have to come up with more timber for construction, more timber for furniture, etc. So the idea was, how do you balance all of this? How do you do forest conservation? How do you ensure there's timber down the line? How do you satisfy the need for agriculture and growing of food and all the rest of that, okay? And how do you ensure that the community still has access to land to plant their foods and crops and all the rest of that? So we started off trying to plant some trees, and over the course of the last 20 years, our original focus became our main business, because we shifted from producing doors, etc., to really focusing on this model to see about coming up with something that was viable, that was sustainable, and that could create wealth in perpetuity. that would include the community, that would ensure that going down the line, a lot of the trees that were going extinct would be maintained as assets on the ground, allowing replication and restoration of degraded areas, okay? Providing a safe habitat for wildlife, a diverse range of wildlife, okay? Be able to provide timber, right? Whilst doing all of this. Yeah. So it's been a bit of a trial and error and a whole learning process, which has taken us the last 20 years to come up with a viable model, which is able to balance all these competing factors and harmonize them in a sustainable and self-perpetuating whole.
Sure. So that's pretty expansive. So what kinds of trees are you focused on now, and what kind of plants are kind of the foundation of this ecosystem that you're creating or have created over time?
Okay, so we focused on a 210-acre area, okay, and 75 acres of that was degraded forest with some remnant trees, okay?
So when you say degraded forest, you mean it had been kind of ravaged by the community, or it was weak trees? How?
Both by the community and
industry,
okay? So the first thing we did was safeguard the area, okay? And then restock the trees which had been ravaged, okay? But at the same time, we focused on 30 of the most sought after indigenous trees like Iroko, mahogany, wawa, fram. These were like the top species globally in demand. And that is why they were ravished. So we thought, okay, let's regrow them, okay? And then create a new narrative around them. So we regrow them for conservation. And due to the fact that they're becoming extinct, right? Now people can actually come and see them, see what they look like, etc., because they're difficult to come across now. Because we did that, that allowed a lot of the wildlife which had been going missing by migrating because they didn't have a habitat to return to some measure. Obviously, there's some things which we haven't got back, and I don't think we're going to get back, like the elephants, blah, blah, blah. But at least a fair part of the wildlife came back, okay? And we also said that, okay, fine. Around this, we will build an eco-tourism experience where people can come globally and see. So if you want to know what a mahogany tree looks like, this is it in its natural habitat. And we also focus on planting improved tree seedlings by working with the Forest Research Institute, FORIC, of the Forestry Commission, which was industry's institutional regulator. Okay. So we then said, okay, most of these trees, their maturity rate is anything from 50 to 100 years. So we probably won't see the result in our lifetime in terms of trees that are harvestable for timber. But we said, take the focus away from growing it to harvest for timber and focus on them being an orchard of mother trees. So they can provide seeds and seedlings. Right? Which can then be used to replicate and restore other degraded areas. Okay. So Forestry Commission, because we were a national pilot for the Red Plus, worked closely with us because they needed to understand what private sector's experience were, what private sector's needs and expectations were. And we also needed to understand what they needed in terms of being a regulator, the kind of systems and processes and documentation that needed to be in place for them to also satisfy the international accords and protocols, which we as a country, Ghana, had signed up to ensure that any trees which were being produced were coming from a legal source with a verifiable chain of custody. And a lot of these documentation rules, etc., had to be developed, right? So we were like right in the thick of this. And as I said, it took from 2009 to 2017 for the country to totally revamp its forestry policy. Okay. So for that conservation piece, we were able to demonstrate that by maintaining long-term assets on ground and foregoing the immediate cash benefits that came from cutting the trees to sell, right? You would more than replace the revenue which you had forgone from the sale of seedlings, because the trees are providing seedlings every year, okay? From ecotourism, of people coming in to have a nature immersive experience, okay, and to also understand what exactly it is that a forest does, why it needs to be preserved, okay, and also the fact that we were providing and maintaining habitat for animals allows a whole lot of complex interchanges to happen, as always happens in every forest, okay, because you would be interested to know that some trees, for example, can only be grown after having been eaten by animals and it passes through their intestinal tract.
Right.
Before the trees would actually grow. You know, otherwise it's not going to happen.
So what tree is that?
Well, there's quite a few.
There are, okay.
If you were to visit Ghana, Forestry Commission has a forest over in the western part of the country near the border with Ivory Coast. It's called the Ankasa Forest Reserve. Okay. And within that, they have a section called the Elephant Garden. And there you would see a whole lot of trees which can only be grown after they've been eaten by the elephants. And then the elephants, you know, excrete the seeds, and then the seeds then can grow. So there's a whole section of the forest there called the Elephant Garden, which demonstrates this. But then you also have plants which are planted by the birds, because the birds eat them and then they spread the seed.
Right.
It's not only insects which do proliferation and you know, spread seeds, right? It's also birds, different animals, etc.
Monkeys.
Monkeys, yes. We have about 3 different species and families of monkeys in our forest.
Wow.
So, yeah, so that's that whole conservation phase. We are learning a lot from what we're seeing and observing. Okay. And yeah, as I said, everything has changed. We've had to develop a whole research and development side of our business, which basically is learning from nature by observing its processes and seeing how the forest is always about constant feedback. It's always about interchange. It's always about a system, an interdependent system. You know, nothing stands alone. Everything is interdependent.
Right, of course.
So that's as far as the forest conservation piece goes. And because we needed to also be in the business of providing timber, which would generate major revenue to maintain all of this, because all of this is not cheap. Okay. We have some support from the Forestry Commission and private public collaboration, okay, because they also need to understand this, and we're innovating and doing stuff which the public sector is not geared to do or set up to do, you know, and vice versa. We're doing, they're doing stuff which we are not set up to do. So it's a dynamic partnership, right?
Right.
So we had some fast growing tree species. We planted Spanish cedar, okay.
Spanish cedar.
Yeah, Spanish cedar, Cinderella. Okay. So we planted about 20,000 trees of that, you know. starting off in 2000. And right now we have mature trees ready to be harvested and milled and sold on the international market. And as we're taking those out, we are replanting. So the idea is that it then becomes a repeating cycle.
Right.
You know?
Right. So when you...
But at the same time, we had to provide short-term income.
Okay.
When we started, we didn't know, or we hadn't factored that in because we had this romantic idea that everybody would coalesce around the idea of paying for emissions reductions, etc., by paying for carbon credits. But as I said, even up till now, when we all thought everything was sorted out, the U.S. pulled out of the Paris Climate Change Accords. So that hasn't taken off yet.
Got it.
We had to think of what we needed to do, right? Which is another whole story. But then that is how we ended up doing essential oils and natural cosmetics, right?
Okay.
So we developed another 84 acres, which was focused on doing that. And during the course of the period, we have developed and brought to the global market 24 different types of essential oils, which are grown, harvested, and processed at our forest.
Okay, nice. So is that under your own branding, or do you wholesale that to businesses?
Well, it's both.
Okay.
We have our own brand, the Emerald Forest brand.
Emerald Forest, okay.
We also do white label contracts where we provide organic products to people in the natural hair care industry, natural soaps, organic essential oils, medicinal plants, all of that. Okay? So that is within an agroforestry piece, which also allows for food crops to be grown alongside. Okay. So that ensures that the fringe communities or the communities around the forest, one, improve their livelihoods. Because, for example, producing beehives to be given to the local community. And we're producing seedlings, which we give to them. Okay. And we are the guaranteed off-taker or buyer for the herbs and spices and other organic products. We're training them to be able to grow. Okay. And these are things they weren't growing before. These are things they didn't know about, but they're now growing them alongside their, the normal things which they would grow anyway, which is cocoa, fruits like oranges, coconut, palm oil, oil palm, cassava, plantain, etc. But now we've introduced stuff like peppermint, lemongrass, patchouli, etc. to name but a few. Like I said, we have about 24 different oils, which we can then engage them in participating in. Ylang ylang, for example. And we just buy these back from them and we process it at site. So the factories are sited in the forest. Okay. So we're there on the ground with them and they are pretty sure that if they produce, they will be paid. So as part of this, because it's an agroforestry model, they have to grow trees anyway to provide the shade for these crops to flourish under. Okay? So that encourages them to grow back trees. That's why earlier I said it's a forest landscape restoration model. Okay? And it's a mosaic pattern. What that means is that you're not just going to go and grow back forest everywhere. It means that you recognize that, okay, there are all these competing interests. So how can we have a mosaic where we have some indigenous forest, which restores forest cover, okay? We can have some commercial plantation, okay? And we can have some agroforestry, which addresses the needs of the communities, okay? So it's like, instead of competing, it then becomes an entire collaboration.
I was volunteering with two other organizations that work with food insecurity, addressing it in two different ways. And I think I was especially touched by one organization, the Campaign Against Hunger, and what I saw was happening in terms of the families that were coming and standing in line, and like the number of families that were showing up every week. And during that time, also a good friend of ours started one of the first community fridges in Harlem, and I just thought it was such a perfect. I thought it was just a genius thing to because it wasn't something that was being invented. It was just kind of connecting a problem to a solution and using something that was already existing.
Right.
And I think the other thing, there was kind of like everything coming together. The other thing that was happening was during that time, the quarantine was happening. There was a lot of anxiety, and I really wanted to do something where our children could be engaged and participate and feel empowered to actually address what was going on. So we have set up a fridge here in Clinton Hill, and we'll go buy food and take it to the fridge. And then we have friends and families that are reaching out to say, how can we support, and neighbors. And I thought the amazing thing is we saw all these fridges being set up throughout New York. And I just thought it was amazing. I thought it was amazing to see all these fridges, but I think what pivoted a little bit in our thinking was, okay, we don't have to set up too many fridges. What we should do instead is let's focus on supporting any mutual aid groups or neighbors or people or that's setting up the fridges to make sure that they are long-term, that they're sustained and they're here to stay. And we also decided early on to focus on not just food, but fresh and healthy food, because I saw that was one of the challenges with many emergency relief organizations, that they were providing, dry goods, canned foods. It wasn't fresh. It wasn't focused on health. It was more focused on just getting food out. And then the other thing that was important for me was because it's something I've thought about previously, was that a lot of volunteer work I would do, I felt like it was very segmented around either age or culture or specific, just one topic. And I really want to figure out how can we create multicultural, multi-generational space that also, even though you're addressing something that's about injustice and equality, also brings joys and it's just a sense of pride. So that's kind of what's been the motivation around One Love community and the work that we're doing.
Nice. So I'm curious. So you mentioned that you didn't necessarily install the fridges. They were often just there. And so how did you go about the logistics of planning and determining how you were going to continue to stock them and just kind of building the organization as a service organization during that time?
So it's been super organic, because it's as we're growing, obviously the number one kind of determinant has been geography or location, because we started in our own neighborhood. That's where we set up the fridge. We set up another fridge as well. And then it's been about, okay, as we get more people activated, and depending where they are, that will kind of determine. And then the other thing determines it is who our partner is and where we're getting food donations. And that's how we've kind of been growing the network. So, I mean, at this point, we're supporting another 22 fridges across, mainly in Brooklyn and Lower Manhattan. And as we keep growing, because we're now at 100 plus volunteers, we're just going to keep expanding geographically. But the other thing that we also focused on was in terms of consistency. So now, for example, we have food donations 7 days a week. It's over 70 pickups per week. So that's 10 a day. And this idea of trying to do it consistently throughout the whole day, so you can give access to as many people as possible. Because, in the mornings, you might see families with children. Late in the evening, it's, community members that are unsheltered. So it really varies who uses the fridges.
So, and can anyone just walk up, open the fridge and take something out, or are they moderated at all?
No, anyone. That's I think for me, this is the genius part of it, is that it's literally accessible to anyone. And most of these fridges are available 24/7. And I think the only thing that kind of stops us is demand is higher than supply, so we need even more people to get involved and help stock the fridges. But otherwise, the idea is to, make it feel like it's your fridge at home, and you basically take what you need, and then you leave what you don't need, and also welcomes people to also leave what they can as well and share. And nothing is too small, nothing is too big. Yeah.
Wow. So if I have excess food, things that, I may not get to, I can basically stroll up to a fridge, put it in, and that's it.
Absolutely.
Isn't that a beautiful idea?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
Because, we all, this encourages this idea that we all have a responsibility to our communities, but we are all in different places of life. So there's different ways that can work for me. There's different ways that works for you. But I feel like this allows many people to participate and contribute or engage or get support rather than just really segmented to only a small specific group.
You mentioned volunteer organizations and, all of this. Obviously, it sounds like a really strong volunteer effort, but it's always a question of how do you sustain it? How do you find funding? How are you systemizing the organization so that it can stay and be sustainable?
Yes, great question, because it's evolving. I mean, if we had this conversation a year ago, it would have looked very different. We're constantly evolving, because what we're trying to do is let's figure out where are we most supportive and where is the need, so that we will always be a grassroots organization. Our goal is to create toolkits that could easily be adaptable in different cities. So our next step now, for example, is in LA. And even though our value and our mission is the same, the way we go about it in LA might be a little bit different, because it's different how you move around, people get access, how, all of that looks very different. And the goal is to keep doing that with different cities. The other part is we are now a 501c3, which initially, that was not initially part of the plan, because initially I was trying to do something with my family. Yeah. And the next step now will be to raise funding to be able to have at least a core team. But the volunteer aspect is also still important, because it's important from an engagement aspect and connecting aspect, because we're basically using food as the connector. Is because it's a true connector. It allows people to connect across cultures, ages, religions. There's so many ways that food helps us connect. And one of the base tools that we're using is the community fridges. But we're also working to we partner with schools to speak at schools and have families how to engage them. We've also moved from just accepting donations to partner with farms as well, that we actually get donations from farm, but our goal in the future will be to actually purchase produce from farms, because we want to support small farmers and urban farmers. So that's what we're working on as well. But I think the most amazing thing is that we're able to do this in a way that is not about One Love and the One Love team to have control. It's really just about activating, engaging people, because the goal is for people to have all these hyper-local kind of communities that sustains themselves. So that's the goal.
Yeah. So in terms of, this is great, because you are a startup, not-for-profit, and you have experience working in the development production all over the world. So how did that experience help in the formation of your organization?
Absolutely. I mean, I do feel like One Love is kind of it's an intersection for me, like my personal interest and passions and drive, along with my professional experiences. So one of the most, I think, important thing has been logistics.
Exactly.
And I like the logistic part, because we also realize that's also one of the challenges why so much food in this country is being wasted, has to do with logistics, and also obviously laws that doesn't regulate, that allows people, right? So logistics is a big part of it, and organizing and building the infrastructure around it. And there's a couple of things important for us: flexibility and adaptability. Thank you. It's that time of the day. But also like being able to stay grassroots and be connected. So those are like a couple of things that are important that we have to take account when we set up the infrastructure.
Right.
Yeah.
That's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. I truly hope that it has been food for thought for the world that we now live in. The great thing about each of their enterprises is that they are all growing and going strong with mission-critical works. And you can help ensure their continued success with your time, investment, and/or donations. As always, you can catch us with new episodes Tuesdays at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Please do like, share, subscribe, leave us a review. We do love to hear from you. Engagement matters. So if you want to see or hear, and I do say see because so many podcasts nowadays are visual, and if that's something that the audience is really invested in, maybe we can do something about that. But in any case, please do check out the show notes. Leave us a review. They are important. And until next time, bye for now.